Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How to Build an Accessory Dwelling Unit in Unincorporated Sonoma County. Hola y bienvenido a nuestro seminario de web, Cómo construir un ADU en el condado de Sonoma. Let's talk about Zoom logistics. This event is being simultaneously translated into Spanish. Este evento está siendo transmitido en vivo en español. To access that feature, click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. Para acceder a este servicio, favor de oprimir el botón abajo de su pantalla y seleccionar el botón para español. We thank Gabriel Gutierrez, who is offering our audience live Spanish interpretation. Le damos las gracias a Gabriel Gutierrez, quien nos brinda la interpretación al español esta tarde. All right, I'll let Gabriel take the interpretation from here. We invite the audience to submit a question using the Q&A function available at the bottom of your screen. Questions will be tackled at the end of the webinar. In addition, we'll be inviting you to answer various polls that we'll be launching over the course of this webinar, so get ready to interact with us throughout the next 90 minutes. Also, so that you know, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on demand on our website by next week. So let's do some introductions. Thank you again so much to all of you for joining us. My name is Renee Champ, and I'm the director of the nonprofit Napa Sonoma ADU Center. I'm a lawyer by education and a nonprofit leader by trade. I'm a native of Sonoma County, and I'm the first director of the new Napa Sonoma ADU Center. I live in an above garage ADU myself, and I believe in a future where every person in both Napa and Sonoma counties can afford to live and thrive here. I'm joined this evening by some really wonderful folks who I'll be introducing to you throughout this evening. I do want to start by saying a special thanks not only to Gabrielle, but also to Amity, our admin support superwoman who is taking care of all the behind the scenes Zoom logistics for us. So what are we going to be covering this evening? We're really excited to bring to all of you today's discussion to offer resources and guidance on planning, permitting, and building ADUs directly from Permit Sonoma's planning and building divisions. This webinar is primarily intended for homeowners in unincorporated Sonoma County, which has different rules than the incorporated cities in the county, with plenty of information that should also be helpful for those who work in the industry and others as well. For today's agenda, I'll share a bit about our nonprofit organization and provide a quick overview of the different types of accessory dwelling units. Then we'll hear from our wonderful panelists from Permit Sonoma's planning and building divisions. And we'll leave time at the end for brief FAQs, and then we'll dive into audience Q&A. Before we dive into our content further though, I'd like to take a moment to hear from all of you briefly. Amity is going to pull up a poll here, and I'd love it if you'd take 30 seconds to answer it. The poll is completely anonymous, and in case you're curious about our sample size, we have about 50 of you at this moment on the webinar. You can all answer multiple different options for what your accessory dwelling unit goals are. So what are your goals in building an ADU? Is it rental income, providing housing for a family member? And again, we allow you to answer with multiple options because some of you may have different short and long-term goals for your ADU. So go ahead, scroll through all those options and hit the submit button when you're done. I'll give you a moment to review the options. All right. So it looks like just over 64% of you are planning for retirement. So smart. We have a lot of folks who have that as a goal. Just over 50% are looking for rental income, 45% housing for a family member, almost 40% helping out the community, like housing a teacher, 36% increased resale value for downsizing or moving into, and some other options there as well. Thank you all so much for helping us. It's really wonderful to hear directly from you. We really love having that engagement, and we'll be asking you to answer some more polls, which we take into account in all the work we do as a nonprofit going forward, and also helps us tailor our content this evening. Let's talk briefly about the benefits of accessory dwelling units. Homeowners often cite opportunities to keep their family together and build wealth as their primary reasons for building an ADU on their property. And some homeowners, as we've seen from the poll, see ADUs as a source of rental income in the near term and a downsizing opportunity in the future that would allow them to rent out the primary dwelling for retirement income. There are so many good reasons to build an ADU, and if you're here with us this evening, you probably have your own very good reasons, as we just discussed in this poll. If you're interested, you can also check out our website and our ADU workbook, which I'll talk about more later on page 7 to learn more. A little bit more of an intro to our nonprofit. So the mission of our organization is to help homeowners build accessory dwelling units. Napa Sonoma ADU is a fiscally sponsored project of Napa Valley Community Foundation with support from Community Foundation Sonoma County. And we just formally launched with My Hire this past spring. We've hit the ground running, and we have so much more that we're excited to do. We collaborate with local jurisdictions, like the folks you're going to be hearing from this evening from Permit Sonoma, as well as other nonprofits and the private sector, with a goal of increasing housing affordability in our community. Regardless of your goals for building an ADU, the Napa Sonoma ADU Center is here to help anyone who wants to build an ADU on their property for any reason. We'd love to hear again from all of you, so we're going to pull up another poll right here. We'd love to hear, what part of your ADU project are you most looking forward to? So sometimes we get into the nitty-gritty details and we don't talk about, well, which pieces are we really looking forward to, and where can we find some creativity and fun here in this process? So you can select multiple options. Are you interested in designing a floor plan, selecting finishing materials, planning green or eco-friendly building elements, the move-in of a family member, friend, yourself, or a tenant? Go ahead and select all the options that are applicable to you. Scroll through, hit the submit button. And thank you so much for engaging with this poll. All right. So almost 60% of you are excited about the move-in. Let me tell you, that is the piece that we hear routinely as the piece that most folks are excited about. Almost 50% are also excited about designing the floor plan, and I couldn't agree more. If you're interested in kind of some design space recommendations, you can check out our recorded ADUs 101 webinar that's on our website. It has some really good ideas for designing floor plans. And there are also floor plan samples on our website and in the ADU workbook. And then almost 50% planning green or eco-friendly building elements. That is a standout volume of folks compared to some of our other jurisdictions. So it looks like Unincorporated Sonoma County is particularly interested in that. Doesn't surprise me as someone who's from Unincorporated Sonoma County myself. Thank you all so much for answering that poll. Before we continue, as I mentioned before, I want to give you a quick overview of the different types of accessory dwelling units. So a lot of us might not realize that there's actually 5 different types of ADUs, as well as a junior ADU. So these 5 types you see here, there's multiple different types, and they can provide living facilities for 1 or more people. As you probably already know, they can be known as granny flats, second units, backyard cottages, and more. So as you can see, there's detached units like a backyard cottage, above garage ADUs, which I live in myself, interior conversions of already existing space, like in your primary residence, that can be turned into an ADU. Multiple different types there, and you can learn more about those on our website as well. And then there's also a junior accessory dwelling unit. So under new state laws that came out in January, a lot of homeowners can actually now build both an ADU and a junior ADU on their property. A junior ADU, you can see here, is no more than 500 square feet. It is located within the existing walls of the primary residence, including within an attached garage. The owner has to occupy the rest of the house or the junior ADU. And the bathroom can actually be shared with the primary residence as well. All right, let's talk a little bit about our organization's tools and resources. So you can see here a list of various resources and information that we provide to homeowners. I'm not going to walk through all of it here because it would take too much time, but I encourage you to go to our website, napasonomaadu.org, and check all these resources out. I'm going to do a deep dive into 3 of them with you right now, though. So first, I want to tell you about the ADU workbook. I mentioned this before, and actually in one of our reminder emails, we let you know that if you want to navigate to our webpage and download this for free, you can. And you can follow along throughout this webinar. We're going to be referencing various specific page numbers throughout our content. Or you can get out a pen and paper and write down some of the page numbers that I refer to that you want to make sure to go back to. So this ADU workbook walks folks through the whole ADU journey: planning, designing, permitting, building, and rental process. And it's a really great overview and resource for Napa and Sonoma County homeowners. We also have our calculator tool, and I'm really excited about this tool. It was put together with the help of a consultant, Baird and Driscoll Community Planning, and it's really user-friendly. It's really easy to get to right on our website under the resources tab on the main page. Go to the ADU calculator tool. You can input the amount of square feet for your ADU. You can input the level of quality finish that you want, information about the site-specific elements that might increase the cost of building an ADU, like if there's a slope that you're building on, things like that, what type of ADU you want to build. And it helps you estimate not only the budget, but also the likely monthly rental income that you could earn from it, depending on which jurisdiction you're in, as well as that return on investment over time. So it's really detailed, helpful tool. Definitely recommend that you check that out. And then finally, we have our address lookup tool, and that allows homeowners to go onto our website, punch in your property address, and identify if you're eligible to build an ADU and or junior ADU on your property. And after the new state laws that came into effect in January, the answer most likely is going to be yes. So Permit Sonoma is going to talk a little bit more about eligibility for building ADUs and junior ADUs on your property, but that tool is a really good starting place for you specifically to go to as well. A quick note now on the services that we provide. So we also, in addition to these informational tools and resources, we provide high-level technical assistance and problem-solving support to homeowners. So you can email or call me anytime, and we have relationships with wonderful folks like the panelists you'll meet this evening, and they help us ensure that we get detailed information about local ADU rules to you and help you navigate the process all throughout the way. So feel free to reach out with any questions that you have. We also help folks kickstart their ADU projects through our ADU feasibility consultations. There's detailed FAQs on our consultations page there that you can see the link to on that slide right on our website. But basically you complete a 10-minute questionnaire, then we do pre-screening research on your parcel. Our ADU expert will then come hold an hour-long site visit with you on your parcel to talk through your ADU goals and recommendations for your project. And then after that site visit, you'll receive a customized 20-page ADU feasibility report to help you kickstart what are the recommendations for your project, what are some cost drivers that you should take into account, what are the next steps for you, what are your local rules, and what is the likely professional team that you would want to assemble given the specifics of your ADU project. We have more services in the pipeline, so stay tuned, but definitely check out those feasibility consults because we'd love to come help you out with your project. And it's free, so check out more details on the website and hopefully get to meet you in the near future and help you out with that. Okay, I want to just kickstart for you a little bit of context and understanding of ADUs specifically in unincorporated Sonoma County. So you can see here the data we have for the number of permit applications submitted for accessory dwelling units across the last several years, as well as for 2018 and 19, the number of completed ADUs that have received a certificate of occupancy from the county. This is really helpful information just to give you some context. And as you can see, thanks to a couple different waves of new state laws that govern the local rules, it's become easier over the last few years. And as a result, the number of ADUs permitted has actually more than doubled. And if you're curious, the source for this data is California's Department of Housing and Community Development. All right, we're about ready to hear from our panelists at Permit Sonoma. And before we dive into that, I also just want to make sure that you have a helpful kind of overview of the full ADU process, start to finish. So to give you some perspective, we're going to do a focus this evening on the permitting and construction stages. You can see starred there on that process map. And you can see that those come after the pre-development and design development stages. The ADU feasibility consults we provide are for the pre-development stage to make sure that you start off from day one on the right foot with your project. And it's also really great that you're here this evening because it's really helpful to have a good sense of the permitting and construction stages up front, as that's going to inform your thinking during the first two stages of the ADU process. It's folks like the staff at Permit Sonoma who you're going to hear from now who take you from that feasibility consult and the work you do with the designer or architect on to make sure that you plan and permit your ADU in a way that's efficient and helpful to set you up for success for the building stage. So I want to also remind you before we dive in that building an ADU contains all the same complexities of building an entire house. So it's just smaller than a regular house. So unless you're converting already habitable space, like a part of your primary home, or if you're doing prefab, which can remove some of these elements, your ADU build is going to entail constructing a foundation, exterior and interior walls, a kitchen, bathroom, plumbing, electrical, and all of that other good stuff. Unless you're doing your ADU build as an owner builder though, your professional team, such as your designer or architect or general contractor and others, should do most of the heavy lifting when it comes to the nitty-gritty details that we're about to dive into with Permit Sonoma staff. However, it's really helpful for you to have a grasp and understanding of the details that we're about to talk about as you go into your ADU project to ensure that you're engaging with your professional team as an empowered and knowledgeable consumer. With that said, if you don't memorize all the details of the codes and rules that we're going to go into this evening, that is very normal and totally fine. Again, as long as you have a professional team that's diving into that for you, you're going to be good to go. So to learn more about the ADU process and hiring your professional team on that note, you should check out our ADU workbook, and you can see the specific page references for each stage here on this slide. All right, we want to hear from all of you once again. So I'm gonna hand it over to Permit Sonoma in a second, but we want to know before we start going into this next stage of the webinar, what are your concerns in building an ADU? And most people have more than one. You can choose as many options here as you'd like. Is it the cost? Is it difficulty of permit approval? Difficulty of construction management? Privacy with the ADU on your property? Certain site constraints on your property, like a large tree you need to navigate around, or challenges with actually getting to your property? Are you worried about challenges of renting and managing the ADU? Go ahead, input as many options as you'd like, scroll through those to make sure you don't miss any, and hit the submit button when you're done. Okay. All right. And just so that you know, like I mentioned before, we have just over 50 folks with us this evening to give you a sense of the sample size as we look at the poll results. We have 67% of you are concerned about cost. It is very common that cost is a primary concern for folks. It makes total sense. 64% are concerned about difficulty of permit approval. 61% concerned about site constraints. And over 50% are concerned about scrutiny from the planning and permitting department, which is also a very common concern that we hear from folks. So I hope that in meeting Katrina, who I'm about to introduce from Permit Sonoma, some of those concerns and worries will be laid to rest. But thank you all so much. 12% of you, by the way, also mentioned conflict with neighbors. And I want to let you know that thanks to the new state laws, ADUs now the permits are approved through ministerial approval. So there's no public hearing or anything like that. And in our ADU workbook, we actually have a section you can refer to that talks about how to have a productive conversation with your neighbors about building your ADU. Okay, with that, I'd like to welcome and introduce Katrina Bramer. Katrina is a planner with Permit Sonoma, the land use planning and development permitting agency for unincorporated Sonoma County. Her work with the county primarily involves coordinating with property owners and developers to process land use entitlements for residential, commercial, and industrial development proposals. Katrina's efforts at Permit Sonoma focus on housing, design review, land development, and fire rebuilds, largely in the Sonoma Valley and unincorporated Santa Rosa. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Katrina, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Renee, and for everybody listening in for joining us. I'm especially grateful for the Napa Sonoma ADU Center for this forum that you've provided, and I'm super excited to share some information and resources and hopefully make it a little less scary. So I'd like to start off by introducing Permit Sonoma a bit more, which is, as Renee mentioned, the Consolidated Land Use Planning and Development Permitting Agency for unincorporated Sonoma County. And the department consists of several larger divisions with smaller sections. The first is the Engineering and Construction Division, which includes building and safety, code enforcement, engineering, well and septic. And the second is the Planning Division, which includes project review and comprehensive planning. And the third is the Fire Prevention and Hazardous Materials Division. So as our offices have been largely closed since the start of the pandemic, the best way to contact us is by email, although we are also available by phone. And our contact information is on our website, but you can also refer back to this slide at any point. So over the past few years, changes to state law have progressively made it more permissive to build ADUs in California, as they've been recognized as a creative opportunity to support the growing housing needs across the state. With these permissive changes, the county has experienced a steady upward trend in ADU construction, as Renee showed earlier. The number of permitted ADUs in unincorporated Sonoma County has roughly doubled since 2017. And the most recent and major changes to state law went into effect at the beginning of this year. One of the more significant provisions of the new law that affects property owners in the county is the removal of minimum lot size requirements for ADUs. Our previous ordinance applied different ADU requirements depending on the size of the lot and the type of water and sewage utility, and these no longer apply. Some other highlights of the new state law include a 60-day processing time of a ministerial application, setback reductions, and limitations on impact fees and utility connection fees. With the new state law, the county's ADU ordinance no longer applies as of January 2020. ADU development standards default to those provided by state law unless or until a new ordinance is adopted. So ADUs are permitted in agricultural, residential, and mixed-use zones in the county. They are not permitted in what is called the Z Combining District, which is an overlay zone excluding ADU construction. The Z Combining District was placed on certain areas in the county where there is inadequate water supply or sewer services, significant fire hazard, or traffic congestion. They are also not permitted on properties subject to a land conservation or Williamson Act contract. And there are other housing options to support agricultural operations. So to explore those, we highly recommend speaking with a planner, such as myself. Now I'll walk through some of the more important development standards to consider when planning and designing an ADU. These standards come directly from state law. So setbacks are the distance between the property line and a structure. State law has reduced the side and rear setbacks to a minimum of 4 feet for ADUs created as new construction rather than conversions. And then the setback from the front property line is as limited by the base zoning district, but typically ranges between 20 and 30 feet from the property line. Brian, my colleague from the building division, will touch on building and fire division requirements later on that are related to where the ADU is located from the property line. A new detached ADU can be as large as 1,200 square feet in floor area, and attached ADUs are limited to 50% of the floor area of the existing primary residence. The height of an ADU is limited by the base zoning district, but won't be restricted to less than 16 feet. And lastly, 1 on-site parking space is required for an ADU. However, there are a number of exemptions to this requirement. For example, if the unit is within a half mile from public transit, you will not need to provide a space. And we've developed a checklist, which is consistent with state law, as a tool for property owners to evaluate the type of ADU they could build in the county and ensure that they comply with development standards. And this can be found on our website. It's pretty easy to find if you just Google ADU PRMD or Permit Sonoma. So we know that permitting can seem daunting for a property owner, as we saw in the poll. So I want to briefly describe the general process for you. Before getting very far in the design of an ADU, I highly suggest contacting Permit Sonoma, starting with planning to determine which development standards will apply to your project. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we are only accepting permit applications electronically through our permitting website. So once you have a complete application and construction drawings, you will submit a building permit application online. Other site development permits might be necessary to obtain depending on your property's site constraints, and most will need to be in issued status before a building permit for the ADU can be issued. So it's important to check in with all Permit Sonoma divisions before submitting your building permit application so you can factor these other permits into your timeline. A permit technician will review the submitted application and either accept it or request additional information. Either way, you will be notified by email. Permit technicians do not review applications for technical accuracy, but rather for missing application materials. So that's why we might kick it back at first. If the application is accepted, or once the application is accepted, the permit technician will then route the application to various sections required for review, which typically include engineering if the project will be served by public sewer and water, well and septic if it will not, planning, and fire. The application is then routed to the plan check or building division for a full review once plan check fees are paid for. If the application is complete, the plan check division will act upon the application within 60 days of the date of payment. During their review, plan check will request itemized revisions by email if necessary. Plan check will then approve the permit for issuance, which allows construction to begin once all required division sign-offs have been provided and the construction plans meet all codes. To continue our operations in the age of COVID-19, we've recently started virtual inspections, so now the entire permitting process can occur electronically. To submit for a building permit, there are a few items that are necessary for all applications and that will specifically be used for planning's review. These include a site plan meeting our minimum standards and showing the location of the ADU and the primary home, setbacks, and more. A floor plan, which shows the layout of the ADU, permanent fixtures and such in the kitchen, and the use of each room. And then elevations, which depict the exterior sides of the ADU and show building height and exterior building materials and colors. And then construction plans and calculations are also required. And Brian will go over some of the specific requirements to consider when designing the ADU and preparing for the building permit submittal. Fees required for an ADU can range between roughly $10,000 to $35,000. It's a pretty big range. So it's not possible to provide specific fee information since fees depend on a number of factors, including but not limited to the location within the county, the type of construction, and the size of the unit. I will, however, briefly touch on the type of fees required to construct an ADU. The first is impact fees, which are waived for units less than 750 square feet in size. Impact fees are charged proportionately to the size of the ADU for all units greater than 750 square feet. School fees will vary by district and are regardless of size. Sewer and water connection fees are only required if the ADU is constructed with a new single-family dwelling and for new detached ADU construction. These fees vary by the utility district or zone that your property will be served by and are also charged proportionately to the size. Building permit fees cover the cost of staff time to review the plans, and depending on the specifics of your property and your ADU plans, other site development permit or a sewer permit or a grading permit might be necessary, and those require their own fees separate from the building permit. So two of the most important considerations when planning to construct an ADU are the potable water source and method of wastewater disposal. And a construction factor that's unique to the rural setting, typical of most unincorporated county properties, is the availability of urban services. A majority of land within the unincorporated county does not have access to public sewer and water services, and therefore is typically served by private wells and septic systems. So in designated water scarce areas, property owners must demonstrate sufficient well yield to build an additional residence. So if your property is within a groundwater availability area 3 or 4, you will need to conduct a well yield test and have that reviewed by Permit Sonoma. If you contact any of the divisions at our department, we can assist you in determining what groundwater availability area your property is within. Regarding wastewater, existing septic systems that serve the main home may require upgrades or capacity expansions to accommodate the ADU. The required septic capacity is determined by the number of bedrooms. So if your property has a 2-bedroom primary home and you're interested in building a 1-bedroom ADU, your septic system must have permitted capacity for 3 bedrooms. So we recommend that you contact Permit Sonoma early on in the process to gather records of the existing septic system, if they exist, and to see what septic work may be required. Minimally, a findings report demonstrating the existing system is code compliant is required for ADU construction. An option to avoid a septic system capacity upgrade is what we call a bedroom swap to offset the increase in wastewater flow. This involves altering the primary home to functionally remove a bedroom and would require a building permit separate from the ADU building permit to complete that work. So for properties within urban service areas where public sewer and water are available, a municipal utility or water company must be willing to serve the ADU. So while Permit Sonoma does not regulate or oversee connections to public water providers, you will need to demonstrate that the utility is willing to provide water service to the ADU in order to get a building permit. For connections to public sewer systems regulated by the Sonoma County Water Agency, a sewer permit from Permit Sonoma will be required. So moving forward, Permit Sonoma is super excited to have an ongoing collaboration with the Napa Sonoma ADU Center, and Renee is just a dream to work with. And so we can't wait to continue developing resources and streamlining tools where we can, offer support such as this webinar to property owners that are interested in building ADUs. But for now, I'll turn it back to Renee, then she'll lead us into our next segment for lots of other juicy information about ADUs.
Thank you so much, Katrina. And I feel the same way about you. So for those of you who email or call me with questions about ADU rules in unincorporated Sonoma County, very often I'm emailing Katrina to double check the answer. And she fields so many questions through us to help all of you, and is just absolutely wonderful to work with. So we are very lucky here in unincorporated Sonoma County to get to work with her. Thank you, Katrina. And now I want to introduce you to Brian Waters. So Brian is a senior engineer and the building plan check division supervisor with Permit Sonoma. He has been performing building plan checks with the County of Sonoma for over 14 years. The Building Plan Check Division assumes the role of enforcing that all state and county adopted building, energy, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and green codes have been adhered to and incorporated into the project plans and supporting documents. Brian is going to discuss with you some of the technical requirements of the building code, fire code, engineering standards, and more. So this is a really helpful overview for you to hear. And I also want you to keep in mind that unless you decide to take a DIY approach as an owner builder, many of the specific checklists and code requirements that Brian's about to go over will be taken care of by your professional team, including your architect, designer, building, and others. So also keep in mind that if you have questions, you can continue inputting them into the Q&A chat bar. I'm answering some of them in writing, as you can see, so feel free to check out those answers to various folks' questions, or sit tight and Brian, Katrina, and our other panelists will answer them for you at the end of our time together. All right. With that, Brian, feel free to turn on your video and unmute yourself. I see you there, and I'll let you take it away from here.
All right, thank you for that introduction, Renee. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is preparing for your building permit submittal. And this is the pre-development stage that Renee touched on earlier. That would be when you're going to select your design team and other consultants. So for certain structures that meet certain limitations on the size, wall height, wall layout, those may be designed by unlicensed building designers or even homeowners themselves. More complex plans are required by the State of California Business and Professions Code to be designed by a California licensed architect or engineer, at least the structural portion of those. Other consultants that you may want to consider early on in the design process are an energy consultant, Calgary consultants, geotechnical engineers, possibly septic consultants, and other special inspectors for certain construction types. Another aspect of the building permit submittal, as Katrina touched on, is, first it's reviewed by the front office divisions for their sign-offs, and they'll apply appropriate comments for approval if they cannot initially apply those sign-offs. Once the application is accepted by all divisions, you'll be asked to pay the building plan check invoice, and once that building plan check fee is paid, then it's assigned to a building plans examiner, and then it's reviewed within six weeks from the date of submittal. So in order to prepare the building plans, the County of Sonoma has a checklist for the residential plan requirements, and it outlines some residential code requirements that are required, and also the plan organizational requirements, and touches on how to submit those in appropriate files to our building permits record systems. For any questions, as Katrina gave you earlier, you can always get a hold of us by email, and we'll get back to you right away. If you're building a new structure on a new foundation or an addition, certain areas may require a geotechnical investigation, which will look at the soil conditions at your site and then give you site-specific recommendations. The requirements and guidelines are found at this link, and then you can apply for the site review prior to building permit submittal if your design team is questioning whether or not a geotechnical report would be required. The geotechnical engineer, as I stated, will provide you with their site-specific recommendations, and they'll review the project plans and details for adherence to the construction plans. And they'll also review the foundation excavations and any fill placement and fill compaction in the field during the construction process. Your building may require a structural justification, which is a calculation document that justifies that the structure can withstand any anticipated loads or forces that the building would encounter during the life of the building to allow the occupants to exit safely. There are certain prescriptive requirements that can be adhered to where you would not need to provide this calculation document. You just have to justify that you have minimum amount of wall bracing for seismic loads or wind loads, or meet prescriptive requirements for beam sizing. If you're converting an existing structure to an ADU, If you're converting a garage, a workshop, a barn, or other non-habitable structures, these must be justified structurally to meet the current code requirement. If you're converting a residential use structure like a guest house or a pool house or an existing portion of your dwelling, you would not have to justify your structure structurally. When preparing building plans, adequate structural plans must be provided that show a complete load path of all the loads from the roof into the soil, and then all the connections must be justified with appropriate calculations, or they would have to adhere to the fastening schedule that's set forth in the California Building Code in this reference table. Sonoma County has projects in the flood zone, and when you're building in the flood zone, you need flood resistant construction for up to 1 foot above the base flood elevation, so the structure can withstand being inundated in a flood event. Certain portions in the flood zone or certain areas in the flood zone would have to be designed to account for the forces of moving water during a flood event. The technical bulletin that's referenced below gives you more information on what to provide in your construction plans if you are planning to build in a flood zone. The California Green Building Code requires adherence to certain standards for ecologically friendly construction. There is a California Green Building checklist that must be completed prior to building permit submittal, and these checklists must be reviewed and approved by a Sonoma County approved third-party consultant. And they're required for new structures and for additions or alterations that would increase the conditioned square footage of your building. And then those checklists can be found on the following, or these links here. For new construction is the first link, and then additions, alterations, and then the list of our pre-approved CalGreen consultants can be found here also. The California Energy Code requires documentation to be submitted with your building permit plans. These regulate the minimum wall insulation and roof insulation and HVAC efficiency, among other energy saving features. The currently applicable energy code requires a new solar system for solar panels for new dwellings. This design may be deferred to be submitted during construction. So you don't have to submit it up front. You can submit it during the construction process, and we'll review it and approve it in a timely manner to not slow up your construction. So this is only required on new construction. If you're converting an existing garage or adding a addition to your house as the ADU, then the photovoltaic requirement would not be triggered. So that's something to consider when you're doing your overall planning and design. The fire division requires an automatic sprinkler system be installed for ADUs in Sonoma County unless an exemption form is submitted and approved. The exemption form can be found at this link. To qualify for the exemption, the total building area must be at or less than 1,200 square feet. So if you're proposing a 1,200 square foot ADU, you would not be able to attach a garage on that structure if you wanted to still qualify for the fire sprinkler exemption. Also, if your existing main dwelling currently contains fire sprinklers, the ADU would not be exempt from the sprinkler requirement also. Sonoma County has projects that are in the state responsibility area, which is an area that's more susceptible to wildfire exposure. So certain construction standards and methodologies must be shown on your plans for those structures. This includes fire resistive siding, some tempered windows, and then protection of your gutters from leaf accumulation, and also limitations on how you can provide venting to your attic attic insulation and underfloor. So they do not have the ability to have flaming embers go in there. So it's just more protection from wildfire exposure in those cases. So as Katrina touched on, you can build your ADU up to 4 feet from the adjacent property line. There's certain requirements if you're in the SRA that if you're closer than 10 feet to a property line, that adjacent wall has to be constructed to be resistive to fire for a time of 1 hour. So there's listed assemblies you would have to adhere to in those circumstances. So your exterior wall is resistant to fire exposure. And then if you qualified for the sprinkler exemption and you're within 5 feet of the property line, then you would have to have a 1 hour firewall in that circumstance also. If you do have fire sprinklers in your building, you could be up to 3 feet, so then no fire resistant walls would be required in that situation. All new ADUs must be shown with adequate fire safe access to the ADU, so that basically allows an emergency vehicle to get within 150 feet to all 4 sides of the proposed dwelling. And then the specific fire safe standard requirements can be found at this link. And if you have questions for the fire division, please email them at this following address. When you're proposing to attach an ADU to an existing dwelling, the California Residential Code requires a 1 hour fire resistive separation between those 2 dwellings. So that separation must be continuous from the roof to the foundation. And then if you're building a dwelling on top of another dwelling, then you need a horizontal fire separation there as well. And then the walls that support that horizontal separation must be protected with the 1 hour fire resistive rating as well. So these following are some examples of what that reference fire separation would look like. It's basically 5/8 wallboard or gypsum wallboard on each side of the studs, and there's specific nailing patterns that you would have to show in your plans. You can just pull these details out of a design manual. The second detail here is for a typical detail of a floor ceiling separation. If you do need to have grading to construct your adequate fire safe access, and that grading is going to have more than 50 cubic yards of cut or fill or more than 3 vertical feet of cut or fill, you would need to apply for a grading permit. When you submit for your building permit application, you're going to want to fill out this grading permit questionnaire to document if you are exempt from a grading permit. Also required is adequate protection of the on-site stormwater from polluting streams or waterways during construction. So you'd want to see on the plans where the straw wattle details are provided to protect those adjacent streams or waterways. If you have to upgrade your driveway entrance, an encroachment permit may be required if you're going to be doing work in the county right-of-way. Requirements on encroachment permits and driveway entrances can be found at this link, and the details of what is required by the Transportation and Public Works Department can be found at this next link here. If you have an existing structure that was constructed or converted to an ADU without getting the permits or inspections, we can legalize that to be a legal ADU. We just need the plans and documents to justify any unpermitted construction adheres to applicable codes. For any information on the legalization process, you'd want to contact the Code Enforcement Division at the following link. So once your building permit plans are approved and issued, you'll start the construction process, and You'll call for your building inspections during that construction process. The typical inspections would include the underground utilities, foundation, underfloor, shear and roof nailing, close in, and then the final inspection. You can contact the inspection division with any specific questions. Certain special types of construction like welding or drilled pier foundation would require special third-party consultants to perform those types of inspections. So we're really happy to be working with Napa Sonoma ADU and getting the information out to everyone there. So that's all the information I have. I'll kick it back to Renee now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was incredibly helpful. Really appreciate all of your time. I feel like I have learned so much in such a short amount of time. And for those of you who want to dig back into that content in more detail later, again, the webinar is going to be recorded and available on our website for you to view on demand. So before we get into the audience Q&A portion of our time together, I do briefly want to go over some frequently asked questions. This is the time for you to start adding questions into that question chat. You can see we've slowly been starting to answer some of the questions in writing over the course of the webinar, but feel free to now start inputting any questions that you have there into that Q&A box. Before we dive in, again, I'm going to talk about some of these items that come up frequently. But because I do want to leave time for Q&A, I'm not going to get into super big depth on them, but rather I'm going to refer you to some of our other resources where you can gather more information on all of these items. And before I get into some of those, I'll also just mention this photo that you see here is one of the homeowners that we've interviewed, and we have her story available on our website, along with a video and photos and floor plan. This is the lovely outdoor segment of Adele's Healdsburg accessory dwelling unit. And her main concern when she decided to build an ADU, which she built so that she could afford to age in place, was she wanted to still be able to host dinner parties and guests in her new ADU home. And so she was really innovative in thinking through her design. And this is actually a lovely outdoor seating area that her indoor space opens graciously into, which in these COVID times is particularly convenient to have that safer outdoor space where you can have a socially distanced visit from family or friends. So let's talk a little bit about ADU cost. This is a question that everyone always asks about for understandable reasons. And it's really hard, especially at the front end of a project, to provide a concrete answer about what the likely cost is going to be. For details on your particular project, again, please check out our ADU calculator on our website, and you can get more information on page 34 of our ADU workbook as well. On average, a small interior conversion can cost under $50,000 if you are converting already finished space and adding a small kitchen. If you're converting unfinished, unconditioned space like an attic or basement, it will cost more, and it depends on the condition of what's there now, but it might cost for a mid-sized ADU between about $100,000 to $150,000. As we've talked about a little bit, but just to make sure that you know, garage conversions are not always a large cost savings. They definitely can be, but they aren't always. And that's because of factors like size and the existing quality of the structure and foundation. So it's helpful to note that in many cases, the difference in cost between garage conversions and new construction is actually more about the size of the unit. A lot of garages tend to be 600 square feet or less, and definitely less than 700 square feet, and that can keep the cost down. Other types of conversions, like basement conversions, are a little easier and tend to cost less because usually the foundation is solid and you don't need to add a roof. But again, it's really specific to each individual ADU project. Detached ADUs can frequently run closer to $200,000 to $250,000, and it's possible to see large ADUs with higher end finishes that run closer to $300,000 to $400,000. We also always encourage homeowners when they're thinking about the likely cost of their accessory dwelling unit to also think about the return on investment over time, either through rental income or increased value to the property. And our ADU calculator walks you through a little bit more detail on that piece. Also important to note again that thanks to the new California state laws, impact fees are now waived for ADUs of up to 750 square feet. Let's talk briefly here about taxes as well. You can learn more about this on page 37 of our ADU workbook. Adding an ADU will likely affect your property taxes and the resale value of your home. However, your primary house won't be reassessed, and your property taxes will only increase based on the added value of your ADU. So said another way, the existing Prop 13 base year value of your primary residence in your land won't be impacted. It's really helpful to talk to a tax professional about your specific circumstances to make sure that you have accurate information for your particular situation and project. A little bit about ADU financing. So your budget, again, is one of the most important parts of your ADU project, and finances for your project are fundamental in determining what's possible. It's best to think about this early on before you proceed on to other steps in the ADU journey. You'll need to balance the design of your ADU with what you can afford. And for example, a larger or higher end unit will likely command higher rent if you're building it for rental income, which might make it so that you can afford a larger loan. Like I mentioned before, our ADU workbook will take you through the important things to consider as you begin to develop your budget on page 37. We like to share that there are 6 main options available to homeowners to finance their ADU. A lot of folks use a mix of these options. And as you're doing financial planning for your accessory dwelling unit, remember to include the rental income, like I mentioned, that you'll receive in calculations if that's applicable for your specific situation. Some lenders won't consider that income when evaluating you for a loan, but it's important for you to consider it in your calculations and thinking about your return on investment over time. So a few of the options: cash savings or other liquid assets. So homeowners with cash savings or other assets that are easily converted to cash often use these to pay for some or all of the construction costs. There's also a cash out refinance. So homeowners with more than approximately 15% equity in their property can refinance their mortgage to pull cash out and finance their ADU. A lot of folks also are able to borrow from friends and family and get loans from them in order to finance all or part of their ADU. Home equity loans or home equity lines of credit or HELOCs. Homeowners with sufficient equity in their home, which is typically between 15 to 20%, can take out a second loan or line of credit to finance their ADU. Renovation loans. Homeowners who do not have enough equity in their home for a cash out refinance or a home equity loan can consider a renovation loan. These loans typically rely on a homeowner's income to qualify for the loan, so a steady and usually high salary is necessary. Let's talk now about time for the average ADU project. As you can see, this couple here is really happy because they just moved into their ADU. And timing can vary based on the project. So it typically takes homeowners 1 to 3 months to get started and assemble their team. Then it takes the project team another 1 to 6 months to develop plans, meet with the city, and submit an application. Depending on how many rounds of review are required and how quickly a homeowner and their project team can respond to comments, make changes, and resubmit plans, it will likely take 1 to 6 months to get permits. But again, thanks to the new state law, as long as you submit a complete permit application, you'll get that ministerial approval or an answer to your permit application within 60 days. Construction itself usually takes 6 to 12 months. And in total, most projects take 1 to 2 years to complete. With that said, it totally depends on the project. I recently saw a small garage conversion of already finished space that was completed within 6 months. And I also recently saw a detached garage conversion that was completed within a couple years, but that was only because of the homeowner's timeline. If they'd had a more straightforward timeline personally, the project itself would have been done in a year. So that is a brief overview of time, which again, a lot of you probably are wondering about. And if you have questions, feel free to input them in the Q&A about prefab options and how that might impact the timeline as well. We also get a lot of questions from homeowners, very understandably, about wanting to hear about real world ADU stories from local neighbors in Napa and Sonoma counties. So I want to make sure that all of you know that we have an entire library of stories just like this, complete with videos, photos, and floor plans from Napa and Sonoma County homeowners who have built ADUs available on our website. You can see the link here. And then we also have those stories available in our ADU workbook. And if you want to see even more, our recent ADUs 101 for Napa and Sonoma County homeowners webinar is available recorded on demand on our website. That's a really helpful webinar to pair with this one because it walks through not only an overview, but more in depth of the ADU journey and the various cost drivers associated with each different type of ADU. But it also talks through designing your ADU, which a lot of you mentioned you're interested in. Really helpful design tips for small spaces, some more details about prefab, modular, panelized ADU options. And also a big hit was a local homeowner from Santa Rosa who recently did this detached garage conversion in her backyard in the Luther Burbank Gardens neighborhood and had a really positive experience, and it's already rented out and generating income for her. And then her long-term goal is to be able to move into it and age in place. So check out that webinar. If you go to our website, the main panel page, go to resources, the drop down, and you can click on webinars right there. And then stay tuned for future webinars because we're continuing to feature local homeowners and stories in those webinars as well. So before we get to our audience Q&A segment, I want to hear one more time from all of you about what type of accessory dwelling unit you're interested in building. So feel free to go through there, and this is a helpful reminder of the types of ADUs, and then also the junior ADU. And as a reminder, folks can usually be eligible to build both an ADU and a junior ADU on their parcel, thanks to the new California state laws. So go ahead and take a moment, read through those options, and let us know what type of ADU you are interested in building. Okay, so 80% of you are interested in building a detached ADU, such as a backyard cottage. We frequently hear from a lot of folks that the detached ADU is what they're most interested in. About 28% interested in building an attached ADU, 28% interested in a garage apartment, and almost 25% are also interested in a junior accessory dwelling unit. That's so helpful to hear. Thank you all so much for engaging with us on that poll. And with that, we're going to transition over to the Q&A section. And as we do that, I want to welcome and have all of our panelists unmute themselves and join via video. And I want to introduce a new panelist who's joining us for this Q&A section, Joshua Abrams. Josh is a principal at Baird and Driscoll Community Planning. It's the consulting firm I mentioned earlier that built our ADU calculator tool, our address lookup tool, and does a lot of incredible work with us to support homeowners and also to partner with our local jurisdictions. And Josh himself myself is a statewide expert on ADU law and policy, so now is a great time to ask Josh any of your systems level questions or questions about the state law, and he'll be chiming in to help answer all of those kinds of questions that you come up with. I also want to make a point here that we have successfully, good job, Katrina and Brian, answered so many of the questions that have come in already in writing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to tackle the new questions verbally that we haven't yet answered. And then, because I want to make sure for folks who are here this evening and also for folks who watch the recording version of this webinar, we're going to answer some of those questions verbally as well and just go back through them. In the meantime, if you guys have any follow-up questions for folks, now's the time to type them into the Q&A. So with that in mind, Brian, I think you might be able to chime in on this, and then I'd also love to hear from Josh. Dave asks, are prefab or manufactured homes build not as good, and I think he means in terms of quality, as site or stick build? Can you give us your thoughts, Brian? And then I'd love to hear from Josh.
Yeah, I can't really, speak on the quality of construction, but, prefab or manufactured homes, can be just as, good as site-built homes. We would not review the pre-manufactured portion of it. We would just look at the foundation portion and the connection of that prefab manufactured home portion to that foundation. The prefabricated portion is reviewed by the state HCD, so their approval is done first, and then we, accept that approval for the prefabricated portion, and then just look at the foundation portion.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Brian. Josh, do you want to weigh in with any additional thoughts?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So I would say that you basically get what you pay for. There's used to be manufactured homes. I think people would think of trailers, double wide, single wides, that were relatively inexpensive, and they didn't hold up in value. They didn't increase the value of your house that much, and they just didn't last that long. There's definitely a lot of new companies in the marketplace that are very high end quality construction that will appraisers, people who buy it in the future, your house in the future when you sell it, they won't know it was built off-site. The disadvantage is they might cost just the same as if it was built on site. Maybe if you have a real easy site to get to where they can just truck it in without a crane, maybe you'll save 10%, maybe you'll save a little bit more. But in some cases it'll be the same or no savings or even a little bit more. They do have the advantage too that they're often faster and a little less hassle to do. You don't need to think about as many pieces in decisions. But yeah, there's some really high quality providers out there.
Josh, follow-up question on that one. So there's a couple things confronting Napa and Sonoma County homeowners right now. One of those is like a less availability of builders to do stick build as a result of the new wave of rebuilds, very sadly, that we're having to do thanks to the recent wave of wildfires. Do you think that prefab is a good option for homeowners who might be struggling to find builders? What are your thoughts on that? Because I know it's important to weigh, all those different factors that you mentioned when you're thinking that through.
Yeah, it's a great option. It is really true that it's sometimes hard to find people to work on ADUs because in a lot of cases they'll have a bigger job rebuilding a whole house or something, so they won't want to do the smaller job. There's some people that really like those smaller jobs, but definitely some homeowners have trouble finding them. And the modular producers, a lot of them will actually they'll have the foundation people on contract, so you won't have to find the foundation people. They'll take care of all the pieces and it'll be built off-site and trucked in, and then you know it's going to be there for you. You don't have all that stress of finding someone.
That's so helpful, Josh. And let me know if you disagree with any of this or would add to it. But one thing that I've also been telling people is, as you mentioned, there's a lot of startup prefab companies out there right now. Some of them just launched as a result of the new state laws. And so I would just say, ask them how many ADUs they've completed with final inspection, ask to speak with homeowners who have gone through that process with them and who have maybe lived in or had someone using that ADU for a period of time. And also know that, as Josh mentioned, there are some pretty incredible new prefab companies out there with some gorgeous designs. So I don't know if you would add anything else to that vetting criteria, Josh.
Yeah, I think I think that's really good advice. And then in particular, hopefully the people they recommend are California specific, because there's a lot of hazards, earthquake and fire, and California building laws are a little different. So ideally it would be somewhere other people in California to check references with.
That's such a great point. And then the final piece on the cost is, even though a lot of high quality prefab isn't necessarily going to be a cost savings compared to stick build, there is that possibility that if the timeline is shorter and you're building the ADU for rental income, you might be able to get a renter in there and start getting that rental income earlier than if you're doing a stick build. With that said, I should also mention, if any of my family members and friends who are builders are listening and feeling stressed out as I'm singing the praises of prefab, there are so many good reasons to go with the stick build option, the customization. I mean, the benefits are endless to that. And just so that you all know, we're working on putting together a registry of builders that work locally in Napa and Sonoma counties, and we'll have that up on our website to be a resource for homeowners as well as you're seeking out builders for your project.
And then
So
I'll just add one thing, that it's actually even it's not discrete categories. Oftentimes there'll be modular builders that give you some degree of customization, or people that build on site, but they say, well, but we get our walls as a special type of panelized wall that we just put up. Or so there's a lot of there's two ends, and then there's a lot of in the middle, partially built on site or off site.
thank you so much for that caveat, Josh. That's such a great point. Okay, I'm going to turn to another question we have here. Thank you so much, Kenneth, for elaborating on your earlier question. So this is a question, I think, for Katrina and or Josh on height limits for accessory dwelling units. Can you just reiterate, what the height limit is for an ADU in unincorporated Sonoma County, and also how that works in the case of an ADU that's over garage? For example, if you want a minimum standard 8-foot garage and the ADU room heights with a 12-inch floor framing.
Yeah, so that was a little bit confusing, the not less than 16 feet. That just means that certain zoning districts, which are R1, R2, and R3, have a limitation for detached ADUs of 16 feet in height. All other zoning districts, the height is the same as the base zoning district, which is usually 35 feet in tall. So it depends on your zoning district what the height limit is, but it'll either be 16 feet or 35 feet. So in zoning districts that aren't R1, R2, or R3, you can have a detached garage with an ADU above.
That's great. Thank you, Katrina. And can you share with folks how they can find out what zone they're in on your website? It's actually much easier than you might think.
Of course. So there are a few ways to do that. And I'll actually grab the links and send that into the chat right away. And so you guys can take a look at that. But you can also just type in active map permit Sonoma into Google. And then that should be one of the first things that pop up. You can click on the zoning map and type in your address. But there's also a way on our website. If you type in zoning permit Sonoma, it should lead you directly to that. You can type in your parcel number or your address. It'll give you a list of various metrics and information related to your property specifically, such as your groundwater availability area, if your property is served by a well, your zoning, and all that fun stuff. But I'll put the links in the chat right now.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Katrina. And then we had several questions about solar. Can we recap in just a couple sentences when an ADU is required to have solar?
Yeah, sure. So it's basically if it's a new detached structure. If you're converting an existing structure or doing an addition that shares a wall with your existing structure, then it's considered an addition or alteration in the California Energy Code and not a new construction in the California Energy Code. So that solar array requirement is only applicable to new construction. So when you're doing an addition or alteration or conversion, then that would not be triggered.
Thank you for that, Brian. And Josh, I wonder if you have more to add or to espouse upon with regard to the benefits of solar. And also, I'm going to go out on a limb in this live Q&A and say, my understanding is that there might be a tax rebate on solar that is going to expire in the coming years. So now might be a good time to add solar. Do I have that right? Or do you have anything that you'd add, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, the tax rebate, I think it steps down. I'm not sure if it totally expires at the end of the year. Um, my experience, everyone I've talked to, when they're told they have to do it, they grumble and they say blah blah blah, and then when they do it, they say, "I wish I had done it earlier." It is annoying being told you have to do something, but if you're already doing a construction project, you'll find the costs have come down a huge amount, and the quality of the solar, they last longer and they get more energy per square foot, and you'll knock your energy bill way down. If you put in a battery backup, you'll be more resilient if PG&E cuts power. That I think you'll end up being happy you did it if you do it.
That's great. Thank you for that, Josh. We've had several questions about what counts towards square footage from several folks. Can you guys chime in about some of those nitty-gritty details? You know, does an attached garage count towards the square footage for an ADU? What about eaves or decks, etc.? Can you guys elaborate? And that would be Brian or Katrina.
Yeah, so I can speak a little bit more about that. So it's all storage or interior accessible space typically counts toward the size limit for an ADU. Garages would not count. There's no size limit to the garage. So, you know, if you have a 1,200 square foot detached ADU and you want to add a however big garage, that there's no issue with that. If you want to have a covered porches that are, you know, considered unenclosed, that are open at least on two sides, that would not count toward interior square footage. So interior square footage, depending on whether, or regardless of whether it's conditioned or unconditioned, counts toward the size limit.
Thanks so much, Katrina. What about lot coverage? Would there be any lot coverage issues that folks should take into account when they get into like the size of the garage?
So the garage, if it's a separate, let's see how to.
I know, well, I'm only supposed to be asking ADU questions, right?
Well, okay, so lot coverage would only count to the extent that it would disallow the statewide exemption ADU, which is an 800 square foot ADU up to 16 feet in height. So to the extent that you would be barred from building at least an 800 square foot detached ADU, lot coverage would apply.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Katrina. We also have a question that I think comes up for folks a lot about converting a guest house or a pool house or something else to an ADU. What is a high-level overview of what that process would entail?
So Brian may be able to speak more about the type of construction documents that would be required to convert a guest house to an ADU, but just talking generally, how the county defines a guest house is essentially a detached bedroom. It doesn't include any kitchen facilities. It may include a full or a half bathroom and some living space, and that's basically it. So in order to convert it to an ADU, you would need to add a kitchen and a full bathroom if you do not have a full bathroom. So it needs to be a completely functional, separate living space in order to be considered an ADU. And so we would need to see a floor plan to make sure that it complies with the state law and all the other development standards. But Brian, do you want to speak more about the type of, you know, upgrades or anything that would be required to convert a guest house to an ADU?
Yeah, the main thing would be the fire separation between the two units. You know, that fire separation also, you know, will give you some sound insulation. between the two units. If you have someone rent it out or something like that, that's always helpful to have a little bit more sound insulation. But each dwelling unit has to meet the requirements for exiting and entrances and everything like that, and have a bathroom and a kitchen. So basically, the plans just need to show what the proposed floor plan is, and then we'll review that to verify that it meets all the applicable building code requirements for an individual dwelling unit.
But I would think I mentioned it to somebody on the Q&A because a guest house is a residential occupancy already and technically considered habitable space. What other calculations or any specific details might be needed, or what upgrades might be needed, except for fire separation, I guess?
Yeah, if you're not adding any more conditioned square footage, then you wouldn't need to justify any CalGreen components or anything like that. So, the main thing is the fire separation and just verifying that there's independent entrances and exits to each proposed dwelling unit.
Thank you both so much for that. Another question, can an ADU be attached to a pool house, a common wall with a 1 hour fire separation, or above a pool house?
So from the building division, you would not need a fire separation between the two because it's not a dwelling. The pool house wouldn't be considered a dwelling. I think the planning division would probably count the total square footage in that 1,200 square foot limitation. So I don't know if Katrina wanted to touch on that. But yeah, it wouldn't be two dwellings, so you wouldn't need the actual fire separation.
So I'm actually not 100% sure about this answer, but I'd like to say that probably not, because they would be considered two residential occupancies. So the size limit would be a little funky. Perhaps if they were completely two separate entrances between the two and there was no interior accessibility between the two different structures, that would be fine. But if you still have questions about that, go ahead and email me and I'll get back to you with a more clear answer.
Yeah, it is kind of a unique situation.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for that. So another one of the questions that I think is helpful to review is just, should I choose to connect my water and sewer directly to my home and not to the street, I assume that I will forego additional connection and service charges. And I think you had an answer to that, Katrina.
1 second. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, Renee. I was looking into the pool house question.
Oh, totally. Sorry. This is the water and sewer connection question that was asked earlier. Should I choose to connect my water and sewer directly to my home and not to the street, I assume that I will forego additional connection and service charges. Is that correct?
So I can't 100, it all depends on the situation. And I'm not the sewer expert here. But my understanding is that sewer connection fees are required for all new detached ADUs. And when the ADU is constructed, detached or attached with a new primary home. So that's when sewer and water connection fees kick in. So if it's conversion of existing space, then within an existing structure or within the existing primary home, sewer and water connection fees will not apply.
Thank you so much.
And I believe I did respond to that question with some information and a link and an email and a link. So if you want that, I can spread that information as well.
That's helpful. I think everyone can see the asked and answered questions.
Cool.
So folks, you can refer to that one there that came in at 6:57 p.m. Okay, So I want to make sure that we get to all of the common questions, and also just want to let you all know that should your question go unanswered, or if you have follow-up questions, you can email Katrina. You can also email me at info@napasonomaedu.org, and we will look into your question further for you. But we had a follow-up question. Good point. It would be helpful to know about the tax rebate question since you bring it up. Absolutely. So one of our team members Googled it quickly here for you. And so I can't 100% vouch for this because I haven't double checked it, but it looks like it's possible that the solar rebate goes from 26 to 22% in 2021, and looks like it's expiring in 2022. So that is the answer to the tax rebate question. I agree, it would be helpful to have a confirmed answer on that one. Okay, you guys, this has been so helpful. We really appreciate all of your time, and really glad that we could get into these details with all of you. So thank you so much for joining us, and I want to go back to our slides really briefly, make sure that everyone has our contact information there. napasonomaedu.org website. Please check out our resources. We're here to help you. Again, if we didn't get to your question, reach out to us, info@napasonomaedu.org, and we will get you an answer. And if you have follow-up questions when you look into that ADU workbook or other resources as well, just reach out to us. And I want to say a special thank you to our supporters and collaborators. As I mentioned before, we're a fiscally sponsored project of Napa Valley Community Foundation with support from Community Foundation Sonoma County. And we also are so appreciative of the opportunity to partner and collaborate with Katrina and Brian and the team at Permit Sonoma and the County of Sonoma. I should also mention that we are supported by generous grants through the cities of Napa and Calistoga and the County of Napa as well. And just want to say also in closing, a huge thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. It's so wonderful to get to interact with all of you. I hope to get to know you even more if you reach out to us with questions or sign up for one of our free ADU feasibility consultations. There is an anonymous survey that's going to pop up as we close out our webinar here. So please answer those survey questions. We really appreciate getting your feedback. We're constantly iterating the content on our website and in these webinars in response to feedback from viewers like you. And again, as I mentioned, the ADU webinar is going to be available on demand on our website next week. If you'd like to go review it, I index it to tell you at which minutes we cover which content, so you don't have to watch the full hour and a half or click through it. And thank you all so much once again. We really appreciate you, and we hope to help you along your accessory dwelling unit journey. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you again to our panelists, Gabrielle, Amity, and all of you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.